So good morning. I'm LaShonda. We're going to go ahead because we're a little behind and introduce Micah from Focus Property Inspections. He's also our lunch sponsor for today. So thank you very much. And you just want to come up real quick and tell us what you guys offer. I'm giving you this mic. You can hold it or...
Hello, my name is Micah. I'm a home inspector. I'm with Focus Properties. We are a one-stop shop. So if you need a home inspection or a septic inspection, mold, water, radon, we're one call away. You can do it all online. There's military discounts, first responders, that kind of thing. We also do free re-inspections. So most home inspectors don't do that. Our boss makes us do it. So yeah, so we do that. And we have an office full of staff that is there to answer any questions. If you have any concerns, you can always give us a call anytime you need.
You handle termite also?
We do. Well, we do WDIRs.
Oh, okay.
We don't actually spray, but we do the insect report. Yeah, that's probably the most common size of home inspection that we do. So, yeah, and that's us. We're in Eastern North Carolina. Yep. Does anybody have any questions?
I was just wondering, do you have I see you have business cards.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. And, yeah, and I'd like to get y'all's cards too, if you have any. You don't have a business card yet? But, yeah, this has our website on it. Any information you need, you can go there and get it. So I appreciate y'all letting me come this morning, and no problem. Thank you.
We cover basically Raleigh down to Warrenburg and everything through the beach. Okay. Just getting started. No, I've been there a while. Yeah, I've got experience. I'm at great. Appraisers. Yeah, I'm not even sure when. Sorry. There you go. Yeah, you sell a lot. No,
All right. So that is awesome. They offer free follow-up inspections, which is unheard of. So before we get started, there are 3 upcoming CE classes. All right, we have 3 upcoming CE classes. On May 23rd, we have a Gen Up class in Garner at our Garner location. Mastering This elective on May 29th right here in Fayetteville. And then on June 9th, we'll have a Gen Up here in Fayetteville as well. So now I'm gonna pass on the spotlight to Mr. Ethan Brooks with Brooks 2 Appraisers. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad it worked out and I could fill in for Trey, who just is the busiest man in the world.
That's good.
Yeah, oh, it's good. It is.
And all you have to do, this is not a touch screen.
Okay.
All you have to do is just hit the arrow when you're ready to go to the next slide.
Well, so I'm just gonna let this is just my background. I didn't even bring a slideshow. I have found that it works out way better and people like to just talk more if I just let it be flowy than if I had a presentation. So I got plenty of topics to talk about if people don't have questions, but I found everybody's got questions. So
Are always popular. Thank you so much. I'll be calling you for
okay. Well, I'm going to hang out up here. Thanks for being here today. I love to do these. There's always seems to be this disconnect between us and you guys. And so I love to try to build that gap. So I am an open book. Whatever questions you got, I'll be glad to answer them. I will give you the best answer I can give you. But yeah, so I own Brooks 2 Appraisers. We have 8 appraisers that cover 17 counties. We work basically Wake County all the way down to Robinson County at the line, and then everything from there to the beach. So all the rural, Sampson, Bladen, we cover all that area as well. Family business, I took over from my parents 3 years ago. My dad was a firefighter in the city of Sanford, and appraising was his second job. And so my mom was a school teacher in Sanford. She left teaching to go to work with him as well. They retired 3 years ago, and I bought Brooks Sue from them. So we have been rolling along ever since. But yeah, so I'll open it up. I know we were talking earlier about some Tidewater stuff. Would you guys like me to hit on some Tidewater stuff while I'm here? Okay. So everybody knows what Tidewater is? I always like to ask that question.
Can I give you a specific scenario?
You certainly can.
Okay.
You certainly can.
So we had a custom built home that was recently built in Autryville.
Okay.
This home was very extravagant, and so it was very hard to find comps in Autryville. But I feel like that's exactly what happened with the appraisal. And so what happens like in scenarios like that where you have like country areas and there's like this one like super expensive home, I just wonder.
Yeah, so you would go, so like the things that I would do in that situation is I would, I may have comps that give me certain pieces of the puzzle. And that's the best way to look at it is we might not have 3 comps that are all custom built houses on a similar acreage, because usually you're going to have those 2 pieces, custom built and acreage in that area. But what I may end up doing is I may go and find some custom built homes that are on half-acre lots. And then I may also go and find some less custom homes that are on similar size acreage. So what that'll give me is I've got kind of what the home value is, and then I can get some acreage value as well. And so we may have things that support different pieces of that puzzle there to kind of come together and give us everything at once. So, that would be a situation where I would be definitely would be using more than 3 comps because I would be trying to get multiple things that can support multiple pieces. In those situations, a lot of times you'll have detached buildings, in-ground pools, things of that nature. So also trying to find stuff that has some support for those items as well. And sometimes I may go a way far ways away from my subject to find a comp that supports one of those pieces. It happens a lot when I'm doing rural modular manufactured homes where I'm trying to find something of, on some acreage, because you might have a house that's, 1,800 square feet that's on 25 acres. And you got to go find something that supports that 25 acres land value. And so I may have some modular manufactured homes right around me that are close, within a mile or 2, 3 miles. And then I may go 17 miles away to find a manufactured home on 15 acres to compare to my manufactured home on 17 acres. And so though that house may not be the best representation of the market, it gives me on the appraisal some support to say, this is where some of this information came from, this acreage right here. It came from, there's another home, similar quality, style, whatever, that sold on this amount of acreage. And so our values are similar. That comp may get less weight on the appraisal, but it will, in a sense, be just additional support for that acreage property. If that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how, because I was able to find comps that justify the price that the builder charged. But when we got the appraisal back, it came in like almost 40,000 less. So I was like,
yeah.
And then when we looked at the comps that the appraiser showed, it wasn't when we looked at the comps that appraiser showed, I was like, they didn't use any custom. And so I was really shocked by that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I was just talking about earlier. You'll find good ones and you'll find bad ones, and the same thing you get in anything in the world is that there's people that are good at it, there's people that aren't, and some of those people don't want to hear anything you got to say, and some of the people want to hear all the information you got to tell them. And so it's one of those fine lines you have to walk. Where I deal with it all the time too. I call agents trying to get information on property, and they're like, "That deal's closed. Don't bother me. Go away." And then you'll get some that say, "Oh yeah, this, and if you need anything else, call me." And I'm like, "Thank you." So you get it in all industries, and so take the good with the bad, I guess at the end of the day. Yeah. Yeah, but so with the Tidewater process, so it was funny. I was telling the story. So I did one of these meetings in Fayetteville on Tuesday with about 9 agents in that one, and I was talking about Tidewater, and I was like, I actually just invoked Tidewater on a property yesterday, and I haven't even been to the property yet. And I said, and so I said, I'm going today, and one of the agents in the class goes, "Oh my gosh, I hope it's not Katana," and I was like, "Yes, it is." It was her listing. And I was like, what are the odds of, however many agents are in Cumberland County, and there were 9 people in my meeting. She was one of those people. And I told her, I said, first things first, I said, take a deep breath. I said, Tidewater can be the contract value is not equivalent with the appraised value. I said, Tidewater can also be just a request for additional information. And that is what this is. You've got a contemporary house that there's no other contemporary houses around. And so I'm just more so wanting to know, where are you at in your mindset of pricing this house out? And so we left there and everything was, she was okay. And then I went to the property after the meeting, and now in the midst of working on the appraisal, everything's going to be just fine. Appraised value and contract value are going to be A-okay, no problems. But, I just wanted to know more information. I wanted to know where her head was when she priced the house and things of that nature. So I tried to say that, and I try to say that to people and say, like, when you get a Tidewater, of course, you don't know what the appraised value is at that time. A lot of times I'll invoke Tidewater and I have to do it, and I'm $1,000 below, below contract price, or $2,000. So I'm right there at it. Now you will get the instances where it's a $40,000 difference. You'll get a big gap sometimes, but more than not, it is very close. But because of how the VA is, I have to invoke Tidewater. And it's a situation where it's a new construction, and I'm like, I've stretched all I can stretch. We're not getting another $1,000 in this property. It's just not coming from anywhere. That was a builder price increase or whatever the case may be. We're not getting there. And so I'll invoke Tidewater. I know what they're going to send me back because I'm looking at all the comps right here, and then we'll turn it right back in as soon as it comes. So it's one of those things where Tidewater doesn't always have to be the end of the world. And so I always like to tell people, is just, take it with the grain that the appraiser may just be trying to figure out where you were when you price this property out. So, yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that sometimes that you're requesting that.
Yeah, and I mean, there are, I'd say, probably a lot of appraisers that don't use it that way. But for me, especially when I first get into an appraisal, if I haven't been to the property yet, I've already looked to see what the comps are around in the neighborhood, and just based on what I can see on the MLS, what we may be looking at. And so in my mind, I'm like, we may have an issue with appraised value versus contract value. And so rather than just waiting until the last minute, because maybe I'm not going to that property till next week, let me go ahead and send Tidewater in so they can get the ball rolling, so people aren't scrambling at the last minute. So, that's usually what it is. Because this house that I had just done Tidewater on, I thought out the gate there may be some issues with the appraised value, but there ended up not being any problem at all. So, yeah. Yeah. Open it up to you guys. You fire away, and I will dive in on whatever you want to dive in on. I know the push of this is all that glitters isn't gold. So we can talk about, things that do and don't affect value as well. But if you have any other questions. Okay. So I think the biggest piece here to always look at is an appraisal is, first things first, the appraisal is for the lender. So always know that, and always know that when the appraiser is doing an appraisal, at the end of the day, though your buyer may be the one that's paying for that, they are not paying the appraiser. They're paying through the lender, and the lender is the one paying the appraiser. So the lender, unless I'm doing a private appraisal, the lender is always my client. They're the ones who hire me. They're the ones who I can talk to. When an agent or a borrower or a seller calls and says, hey, they're upset about something, I say, and I never want to do it in a rude way, but I always have to tell them, hey, I can't discuss this with you. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Just send them to the lender and have the lender send them to me. I'll be glad to answer every single thing you're asking me right now. I just can't talk to you directly about all of these things. And so, that's the first thing to know about the whole appraisal process. The second piece of it is the way an appraisal is done, and what the appraised value is looking at is what a typical buyer would pay for a property in a typical market. So you get houses that have unique features or things that are done to them, and they say, oh, well, we spent let's just say, for instance, we spent $100,000 renovating this kitchen right here. Their mind goes, we just watched HGTV last night. We're going to get $175,000 ad value for that kitchen that we just spent 100 on. Well, when you do the appraisal and you're pulling comps and looking at things, my question that I always like to pose in these meetings is, if you had your typical buyer, again, keywords there, typical buyer. If you have your typical buyer and you're standing in front of two houses that are identical, and house A has a $100,000 renovated kitchen, floor plan, GLA, everything is identical in these two houses. House A has a $100,000 renovation to their kitchen, and that's what they did. House B has a $100,000 renovation, and they did a new roof, new HVAC, they painted the outside, they updated the bathrooms, they updated the kitchen, they put new floors in, they painted the entire house inside. They spent their $100,000 on the whole house. They spent their $100,000 on the kitchen. Which of those two houses is your typical buyer going to buy?
The second one.
The second one. 10 times out of 10, they're buying house B. And so a lot of times I'll have people that'll say, well, you know, we priced this based on this renovation that they did here. And I'm like, that's great. The kitchen is beautiful. The baths are still from 1960. Your roof is in terrible shape. The heating and air unit sounds like it's got a group of mice fighting inside of it right now. Yeah, the windows are not new. So the question that I always have to ask back to people there is, like, what makes this house worth more than this one? And in my stance and what I see is that people don't want that unique $100,000 kitchen. They want a house that maybe is not of the same level of quality as that $100,000 kitchen, but everything is done. And so when they purchase that property, they say, I don't have to come in here and spend $20,000 on a roof and a heat and air system in the next 2 years. That's new. I'm good to go there. And so, like, that's how you have to look at a lot of this stuff, because I'll appraise a property and, you know, they've done some serious renovations, but they haven't done a lot of other things. You know, they've done the kitchen and they haven't done the baths, or they've done the baths really exquisitely and they haven't done the kitchen. And so it's one of those things where then I'll use the comp for that house, and the comp has been done entirely not to the same level of quality in those areas that the other property was done, but they did everything. And they'll say, well, that's a base level bathroom that they renovated. And I'm like, it is, but your kitchens haven't been touched, you know? So what's my add versus my subtract here? How do you wash that out? And I say at the end of the day, typically there's no adjustment there. And I will get berated to the end of the earth over that, because they're so pinholed looking at this house that we just spent, you know, my client just spent $100,000 in this one space. And I'm like, yes, they did. And it's beautiful. But whoever buys this property in the next 5 years, he's got to put a new roof on. They got to do new heat and air. They've got to paint the outside because you're starting to get some exposed wood. Like, there's a lot of things that now they have got to do when they purchase that home. So is the value add truly there? I would stand on a soapbox, scream till the end of the days that no, there's not. So that's the first thing that I always like to tell people is always think of it when you're looking at what the appraisal is going to say is typical buyer. Typical buyer, typical buyer, typical buyer. Because if you have, again, and I always pose it this way, if you ever want to think about it, mindset, standing on the street, two houses identical, this house has what I'm thinking about here being a value add, this house doesn't. Is a typical buyer going to pay whatever I think that value add is for this house over this house or not? Niche buyer, they may. Somebody who wants that $100,000 chef's kitchen, they might buy that house over here. That's all they care about. But a typical buyer is not going to. Into that whole play, house A and B always identical. So house A is a fully brick exterior. Everything else is identical to house B. House B is a composite sided property. Typical buyer. You're going to pay me $15,000 more for the brick house versus the composite sided house next door? Niche buyer who cares about a brick house may. Typical buyer, they're going to take house B and keep that $15,000 in their pocket.
So I know a question that I get asked a lot when I go on listing appointments. They're like, okay, we want to do some renovations to get like top dollar for our house. Like, where would you start? Like, that's a question I get all the time. You know, what fees? So I have $25,000 spent on renovation. Right now, you're saving a condition this amount of money.
Mhm.
Let's say I put this $25,000 in, what things do I need to do to get like the most money possible?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, the way that I would look at that, and like that, it's a very situation to situation. Obviously.
Typical, like not super custom house,
Mhm.
just like a
Mhm.
you know mid-range house.
Yeah.
Could be built in the 60s or 70s. I feel like that's where I get that question a lot, or they like the newer houses and stuff. But 60s, 70s, it needs new windows. It's all where most of the time it's original roof type of situation. They're like, where is the money?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in that instance, I would say like let's just say for that house, you've got a new roof. Inside, they've put some new kitchen appliances in, but other than that, really haven't touched a lot. So let's just say that's where we're sitting at on this house. Obviously, I wouldn't say go in and do the windows out the gate. I wouldn't say go in and do the HVAC out the gate unless you have some serious issues with the two of those. Now if you got an HVAC unit that, hey, in the summer, it's 95 degrees outside and it's hanging on to 80, 81 in here and it's fighting for its life. Right, it's fighting for its life there. Then the heat and air, I would say that's probably a piece, because if you have a buyer come in July and walk in that house and that heat and air is, and it's 85 degrees inside, sorry, that's immediately I'm knocking 10 grand off whatever my offer's gonna be. So like that may be a spot to start. But if that is rolling right along like a tank, which I have a house that's built in the 1960s and my HVAC, I just replaced it, was 33 years old. That thing was a tank. It was a tank. The HVAC guys came out and they literally would look at it and say, I've never seen one of these that was working. I had a guy who was like 60 years old who came out and he was like, I've never seen one of these working. I'm like, what? So it's so crazy. But so in those instances, I would kind of answer those first couple questions. Like, do we have any issues that need to be addressed? Like, is there a leaky roof? But obviously we're saying the roof has been replaced. Like, are there any issues out the gate that need to be addressed? Because those are going to be things that are going to be knocked by a buyer's agent, and then as well by probably an inspector and an appraiser as well. We're going to find those things, and some of them may be conditioned, so they're going to have to repair them anyways. So those would kind of be my first starts. And then from there, I would say, okay, so what's our best spread of this money? It doesn't mean we're going to go in and gut the kitchen, clearly, because 25 grand, we get stretched for that anyways. But if we've already got new appliances in there, maybe it means we paint the cabinets and we put new countertops in. We upgrade them from the old, linoleum countertops to now we have granite or whatever the case may be, quartz, whatever fits for the style. And then we take some of that money and with, let's say we're in a 1,500 square foot house, we take $4 to $5 grand and we get a lower end but nice LVP floor, and we LVP the floors throughout the house. So that's a chunk of that money. And then we go in the bathrooms and new vanities. We're putting new floors in throughout the house anyway. So new vanity, new toilet, and put new showers in or bathtub, whatever case may be in both of them. Like, you could do that with 25 grand very quickly. Whereas at the same time, you could redo that kitchen with the 25 grand. So like, in my eyes, if you're looking at it in that sense, a buyer coming in and an appraiser coming in to see that property, they're saying, hey, we've touched that, we've refreshed everything. So the pieces that needed to be redone for this house to be livable for the next 10 years are taken care of. Now, if somebody comes in and they want to do a big gut job and put in a nice tile shower, more power to you. But this property is functioning. We've got shower heads that aren't clogged up, that work well. The fixtures are new. And I think you can, in a 1,500 square foot house, you can take that 25 grand and make it go a long ways. But I think the big piece of it is you can't be pinholed. You got to have a good budget. And you just have to be reasonable about how you do it. Like, my wife and I, we just redid our bathroom. And we spent right at $8,500 doing it. And we put in a walk-in tile shower, new vanity, new toilet. We redid some of the old plaster in the drywall. Didn't do it ourselves. Nope, didn't do it ourselves. Paid a guy to do it. It's 60 by 36. I'll show you a picture of it when we get done. But the key of it was we found somebody who could do the work for us. We got a few quotes. We had people come in and get a few quotes. We told them, hey, we're not wanting to blow this thing out. I don't want you to be buying, $500 shower head fixtures. Like, we're fine with Lowe's hardware. That's okay. We know what we want here. And we also know that this isn't our forever home. And I don't want to spend $30,000 in this bathroom, because we have people come and say, oh, this will be $25,000. And I'm like, I'm not giving you $25,000 in this bathroom. You lost your mind. So one of those cases where, you know, we did our due diligence, we shopped around, we found some people to do what we wanted to do. And, you know, is it a custom bathroom? By no means. But is it a bathroom that fits what we wanted and what we need? 100%. And so you can take that money, spread that money around and do some things. You know, but that would be like what I would say there is refresh everything, touch everything, and don't go HGTV crazy. You know, we don't have to have that modern light fixture in the living room that's going to cost us $700. You know, Alan Roth from Lowe's is going to fit the bill just fine. You know, and I'll live on that hill until I'm one day win the lottery and live in a nice house. At this point, Alan and Roth until I die. So yeah, so that would be what I would say. That would be my go in there. If you have a client that says, hey, we want to do this, this is what we got to spend. You know, take that money and spread it as well as you can across the board. Yeah.
So is functionality versus cosmetic like?
Yeah, well, so I think the biggest piece of it is just like it just has to make common sense, and I think that a lot of times people get this idea in their head of like what something can be, and then they just spiral. You know, I'll go in a house and they'll say, "Oh, we just spent this much money doing renovations," and they'll tell me what they did, and I'm like, "Where'd your money go?" You know, like you need to find that contractor and rob them because they just robbed you. You know, like it's one of those deals. But yes, I mean, I would say it's a hand in hand thing. I would say it's a hand in hand thing. At the end of the day, you know, functionality versus the cosmetic piece. I think it goes hand in hand because if you do some functional things but they look terrible, then somebody's gonna come in and say, well, you know, what? I was talking the other day in my class on Tuesday, and somebody made a great point. They said, if you know, let's say you do a lot of stuff inside, but you don't touch the outside, you don't do anything outside, and the outside is in shambles. Me as an appraiser, 10 times out of 10, and more than likely your buyer, unless they're just in, you know, again, they're pinholed and they're just seeing with blinders on. When I pull up to that house, the inside may look like the Taj Mahal, but if the outside is in rough shape, if there's, you know, rotten fascia and soffit in the corners, my immediate thought is like, what else got just, you know, lipstick on the pig here? Like what else got just breezed over to get by? Whereas if that rotten soffit and fascia was taken care of and the, you know, so the eaves were painted, like I don't see those things out the gate. And so immediately I'm like, they took the extra $1,000 out here and touched up these details that need to be taken care of. And so now my you know, my spidey senses aren't tingling when I'm walking in the door going, what else in here has been done poorly? Because they clearly skipped out here. And it's one of those things where I'll go to houses and I'll do an appraisal and it'll be subject to the repair of the soffit fascia. That's a big thing that I run into a lot of times is those rotten corners and everything. Holds up stuff all the time. And I'll come back and they literally have just taken like Bondo and pasted over it and then painted it. And I'm like, I can see the rotten, like who did that? And was like, that's going to get him. Like he's going to say that was okay. Who did that? And so then I send a request back and I say, they didn't repair it. They patched it and it's not repaired. Like the rotten wood is still there. I can see it. And so like those things happen. And I'm like, I know the cost of those repairs. You know, I'm in the process of getting my general contractor's license. So like, I know what that's going to cost. It's minimal. It's minimal. And now they're having to pay, at this point, they've just paid a $150 final inspection fee. And now they're going to pay another one for me to come back again. So they're $300 more in the hole, which is about what it costs to repair that in materials if they do it the right way. And their person's got to come back and fix it again. So it's like those little things that stand out to me so much when I go to a property now, to say like they've done some things, but they clearly tried to make something look right and it's not right. What else is off? It's like taking that little bit of time, that little bit extra money to do those things on properties. Like that's something I tell sellers all the time is, what do we need to do? I'm like, first thing you need to do is make sure that all these little, you know, I's are dotted and T's are crossed. That are things that A, can hold up a closing, but B, you know, will pique somebody's senses when they come to the property in a bad way.
Yeah. That makes me think about, because we seem to have had like a rise in flips out here. Mm-hmm. And when I walk through a lot of them, like the floors are like this, mm-hmm. which I know sometimes it's settlement, but then sometimes they're like
mm-hmm. You got some soft.
And And so that just made me think, so when you guys walk through the house, y'all are checking those things too, like,
Yep.
okay, yeah, you did new flooring, but the flooring in some sections feels like you can possibly fall through.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, I went in a house the other day in Sanford that's an older historic house, and they had refinished their hardwood floors. But I literally walked in the front door. I was walking through the house, just looking at everything, and I came back down the hallway to the front door to start. I was start from there and kind of go through the house, and I just looked to my right. I was like, this doesn't look right, and so I like stepped back and I looked, and then I got down on my knees and I looked. There was a old heater cabinet. It had baseboard heat in this house. It's an old house. And underneath the heat, where the trim went around, there was a drop about this much in the floor. It just fell off, but it was affecting the rest of the floor in that room. And that's what I saw. I was like, that doesn't look right. So that's what I was seeing. So I got down to look, and it was about a 4-inch drop from the bottom of the trim to where the floor was. And so then I walked back outside. So again, see something like that, my senses start tingling. I go back outside, and I hadn't walked around the house yet. So I literally got in there. I came inside. I just wanted to see what I was looking at, and then I was getting ready to kind of start my whole rigmarole. I walked back outside, massive crack in the foundation, and then out into the front porch where I had come in. And so I said, immediately, we've got foundational issues here. And so I subject-to'd it, and they ended up terminating the loan on this one. There was a lot of stuff that this house needed that wasn't going to let it go VA until they did it, and they weren't wanting to do anything. So it was a whole lot of subject-to stuff. And so I called the agent. I knew her from Sanford, and I said, "What in the world?" And she was like, "Well, they said they weren't going to spend any money doing anything." And I'm like, why did you set this up to where it could go VA or FHA? Like, you're not going to get that financing. She was like, well, we just didn't know. And I'm like, now you just cost a buyer $800 appraisal fee, for a VA appraisal. Yeah. And so I'm like, there was a lot of stuff in this that you just banged, which at the same time too, like the selling agent, same question is like, why did you say, let's go VA on this? Like, clearly, there's issues. And then they were trying not to get a home inspection. And I'm like, so y'all were just, yeah. The seller, not the seller, but the buyer's agent they were like, oh yeah, we were just going to go off of what you had to say. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I walked in this unfinished basement, but I didn't walk in all up in the corners and everything. So I'm a big advocate now of getting home inspections on everything. It's such a minimal cost in what the grand scheme of it is. When I bought my house, did my walkthrough, and at the time everything felt great. Had a home inspector come out, and I ended up having to replace 14 floor joists in the crawl space at a tune of about $7,000, which I never in my walkthrough would have found. There was an area in the floor that was a little saggy. It ended up not even being where we replaced 14 floor joists at. So, just an old house with some settlement. That was truly what that was. But a home inspector came out and he was like, "Oh yeah, you got damage on all these joists here. We need to replace them." And they were pretty severely. I don't know how the damage happened. They were like looked like a tree had fallen on the house, but there aren't any trees.
And y'all don't look at, before you appraise, y'all don't look at the home inspection.
No, so if like a lot of times I'll have them say like, "Oh, well, we had this on the inspection. Like, why wasn't it called the appraisal?" And I'm like, "Well, first off, like that's outside of my scope of work. Like, it's not in my purview." Now, I'll have times where they'll say, "Do you want me to send you the home inspection?" And I always, to that, I'll say no. I'll go to houses sometimes and say, there's the home inspection laying on the kitchen counter. Like, they've clearly laid it out there for me to see, and I'll look at it. But it may give me a tune to be like, "Oh, let me keep an eye out for this when I go buy something." And like, am I looking? Like, there's a damaged window or a roof leak that I see on there. Like, let me look when I'm outside to see if there's issues with the roof that I can tell from the ground. So it'll have some of those things come up, but like I never take the home inspection and then like, oh, there's something on the home inspection, I'm going to make that part of the appraisal. And I'll have people come back and say, well, we had a home inspection, they said this, this, and this. And I'm like, that's wonderful. They're totally different than me. It'd be the same thing as if you sent them an appraisal. So, well, the appraiser said this, and like, I don't speak this language. What are you talking about? So I just say we're two different ball caps. Like, I don't try to get into what they have to work with, and hopefully they don't try to get into what I've got to work with in the same sense. So, people ask me something, I'll say, hey, I would take that up with the inspector, and then that's between the other parties involved, not not me. Like I'm not taking something off of an inspection and adding it to the appraisal as a condition of the appraisal. That's something that I would let the agents deal with, and then if the lender gets involved, that side of things. But it wouldn't be something that I would put on there. Now, there's sometimes where things overlap. I see something that said something that they did as well, but it's not going to be where they said something and I'm like, oh, yep, I'm putting that on here and add it in. So
Y'all don't go across it.
So FHA, USDA, and VA, if there's ease of access. So for VA, if there's ease of access for the crawl and the attic, they would like a Head and Shoulders observation. It's not required. So basically, the way that a lot of appraisers, VA appraisers especially, do it is basically, unless it's a walk-up attic or a very easily accessible drop stair attic, they're not going in there. Like I was actually at a house the other day where the drop stairs was in the garage. There was a 7-step down from the house level to get into the garage. So it was a very, very long drop staircase. And I didn't go up it. I was like, I'm not doing this. But if it's just a basic drop stair in a house, I'll pull that down and just pop up there and take a photo. But it literally is, I'm sticking my head in there, I'm looking around, and basically what I'm looking for is there's no water damage that I see, there's no fire damage that I see, and there's no, raccoons staring me face to face when I crawled up top of that drop stair. Aside from that, that's what I'm looking at. Yeah. For the longest time when I started doing this, when I was in high school, The Grudge was a really popular scary movie. And for the longest time, I had So in that movie, there is a time where this guy goes to top of into an attic, and there are body parts in the attic. For the longest time, that was all I could ever think about when I would go into attics. And I'm like, I got to get this out of my head. But so that was what I always thought. But so for FHA and USDA, the rule actually just changed where it's not like the loan can't close if we don't have it. They say safe access, but they really want, if there's access, they want you to access it. But it's one of those situations, same deal where it's quite common is having a garage and the attic access is in the garage, but the garage floor is a lower level. And so you'd need a 20-foot ladder to get into that scuttle hole in the garage. Used to, you had subject to the appraisal of getting access or, whatever the case may be. Now you could say that it wasn't easily and safely accessible, and they can let it slide there. So same deal with a crawl space. I'm going to stick my head and shoulders in there. Basically all I'm looking for is rodents or water. That's the two pieces that I'm looking for when I do that. And if there are multiple accesses for a crawl space, just has to have one. But I'll get to a lot of properties and they'll be locked or they'll be screwed shut. And I've got a drill in my truck, but I'm not going and taking the crawl space door off to get inside of it. So, yeah.
How do you feel about if there is a bunch of updates on a home, and we have them, if there's too much for me to type in MLS, I'll type it out on paper and then just say updated list, updates list and document. How do you feel about, for instance, either us emailing that to you prior to, or leaving it on the calendar? Is that like a common face I can do my own job, or you're like, oh, sweet?
Love to have that. The thing for me is if you leave it at the house, I always, because I've done this, I've taken something from property before that I was like, oh, this is for me, and it wasn't for me. And then I get an angry phone call, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you literally told me that that there was gonna be some information there at the property, and it didn't say for me, but there's gonna be some information at the property. I'm like, oh, I can take this. Took it, was not supposed to take it. So and it was like 2 pieces of paper, but they had left it for somebody else, and that person came to get it and it wasn't there. So I was like, sorry. But yes, I love to have all that information. So if you leave it at the property, I'm always like, just put a sticky note and say, for the appraiser, please take, or whatever the case may be. I am probably because I have 3 heads looks whenever I say this, is as an agent, as a listing agent, selling agent, buying agent, whatever, when the appraiser sets up the appointment to go out, you obviously get a notification showing time, typically, unless they give you a call. But I always say, hey, shoot me an email. And in that email, just say, hey, here's my CMA, or here's some updates on the property, whatever the case may be. If you need anything else, just let me know. And basically, you're not there saying, hey, we listed it at this and it should appraise at this, and here's the comps we use, and you should use these comps. But you're just saying, again, kind of like I was talking about with Tidewater, of just wanting to know what the mindset of the agent was for that property. Of, hey, here's the stuff that I use when we price it out. Here's the information on the updates, et cetera, et cetera. Anything unique about the property. you got any questions, let me know. And so that way you're setting the tone of, we're here to work together. If you need anything, let me know. You won't be bothering me, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just kind of how I always like to pose it, is if you need anything, just let me know. And that way you're not being influential. You're not trying to say, we got to have this number, or this number it should be. You're literally just saying, here's the information I used when we got the, when I did my homework on the property. If it helps at all, I hope it does. If not, no harm, no foul. They may look at it, they may use every same comp you used in their own search. They may not use anything you sent over. But at that point in the time, at least you've kind of been the one to initiate it, to say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And that, I think, is the biggest piece of it at the end of the day, is just reaching out. And you may not send anything over. You may send nothing at all, but you may just say, hey, saw you're going out today. When you get into the end of the, the nit of it, nitty gritty, if you need anything, let me know. I think that's a very great way to open up the line of communication there. And it happens before there's an issue with, the appraisal, or there's an issue with whatever the case may be. That at least we've had our first hellos before that arises. So I
always
hope.
got the like, to me, it's always like, bother the appraiser.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I like. That's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a lot of old school appraisers who, like my dad and a few appraisers that work for me, that went through the time frame of agents that they were friends with, who would call and say, if you don't hit this number, like, you're never getting another, order from this lender, and we're never sending you anything over again. So, like, they went through that time of before Dodd-Frank, when the communication was just free for all. If you don't hit our number, you're not getting any more work. And so there's a lot of people in the industry that have either experienced that or have been taught by somebody who experienced that, that says, like, this is how it always is. Don't talk to them. We can't have any communication. And I'm big, and I'm trying to kind of change that culture to say, like, we can have it. Now, there's a lot of things we can't talk about. You can't call me and say, what's the appraisal coming in at? Can't talk about that. And I'll tell you, hey, sorry, can't let you know. The lender's got the appraisal. They'll send it over to you when they're done. But there are something, I can discuss the facts of an appraisal. I can call you and say, hey, the house measured out at 1,500 square feet. That's a fact. I got measurements here. That's where that came from. I can't call you and say, the kitchen should have been done this way, or, you should have done this, or you should have done that. You didn't do this, you should do that next. I can't talk about that, because that's an opinion. That's part of the opinion of it. But the facts of it, it's this big. It's in this neighborhood. Those sorts of things. I found that the site is this big. Is that correct? Plat says it's 10 acres, and the tax records say it's 13. Just trying to figure out which of those is correct. I can talk about those things. But there are things that we can't discuss. But so, the things we can talk about, I'm open to always talk about. But again, I think that's the way of approaching it as an agent to the appraiser, to say, hey, here's some information that may help you out. If you need anything else, let me know. Boom, leave it at that. It's no pressure there. It's no, P.S. really hope we close this deal, or the thing that I get, Kylie, we get this down here all the time, and it's like, at this point, just don't even call me, because as soon as you say these words, I'm checked out, and I don't care what you're saying, but I'm not helping you. If we don't get this thing closed, this veteran's going to be homeless. They're living in their car right now, and they're going to be homeless. And I'm like, this person is buying a $700,000 house. They don't have the money for a hotel room. They don't have the money for an Airbnb for a week. If this thing doesn't close the day you say it's going to close, oh, if you don't go today, I'm out of town. I had one call me. I was in California on a work trip, and they said, if we don't get out there today, the order came in, and literally the next day was when I get the phone call. If we don't get out there today, it's not going to close in time, and he's going to be homeless, living in his car. And I'm like, you buy my flight back? I will not be making it. And lo and behold, he wasn't homeless. He didn't end up living in his car. But I get that, and the other VA appraiser in my office, Trey, we get that. Trey was supposed to be here. We get that a piece once a month.
Wow.
If this doesn't close, he'll be homeless, living in his car. And I'm like, again, with VA appraisal, I want to do everything I can to help a veteran out. Like, so thankful for that service, and I'm gonna do everything I can to get this thing closed and expedite it in a quick fashion. But the sob story of, you know, of that. And again, it's the repetitiveness of it. It's the same. And I'm like, is there a time where agents get together and y'all talk about like, hey, this is what you need to tell him. He's got his dog living in there and the kids. And I'm like, before you know it, we got the Swiss Family Robinson living in this Toyota Camry here. And I'm like, it's 14 of y'all living in this car with 2 fish and a guinea pig. And I'm like, it doesn't jive, but it's the same story every time. And I'm like, and so again, it's oh yeah, it doesn't close in time. And I know as soon as they say that, I'm like, it's gonna be homeless. He'll be homeless living in his car. And I'm like, how did I know that was coming? How did I know that was coming? So it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, call me and say, hey, if we can get this thing closed out quicker, like that'll be great. Like they've got some stuff going on. Big one that I'll get, and like this one for me, usually I'm able to verify, but it's like, hey, like they're deploying, you know, next week. We need to get it closed this week if we can. In those situations, I'll drop everything I've got going on. As long as I can get there, I'll get there. Like I'm gonna make that happen. But it's the, you know, they truly try to play the sob story of this is what's going on, and I'm like, in this case, you know, as long as I've been doing this now, there's, you know, 100 people that have had to live on the streets because they weren't able to close their loan the day that they said they were going to have to close the loan. And, you know, I'm like, I know there is a homeless pandemic in the area, but trying to pull my heartstrings and play the sob story on it is not the way about it. So, but again, I think all that to say is, yes, we can communicate. Just don't try to be influential in your communication. I think the biggest piece of it is if you're just putting things out there to say, hey, I'm here to help if you need anything, that will work both ways with the appraisers that do, like me, that do want to talk to you, but also the ones that say, I don't need your help, I know everything. Like, you're not going to rub them the wrong way to say like, oh, they were trying to influence me. Nope. If you need anything, just let me know. All you need to say. And I really mean, like, I wouldn't go any further than that. I had agents say, oh yeah, well, I'll say that, and then like, and this, and I'm like, don't add the and this. That's not. All you need to tell them is, if you need anything, let me know.
Y'all are actually in my phone, and I don't know whose number this is, but I remember a situation where it was time sensitive, the closing, and whoever it was amazing.
Yeah.
They were super kind.
Let's see. What's
it's
the?
3566412.
I think that's gonna be Trey.
And I have it in this first two appraisals.
3, 5.
But whoever it was, they were so awesome.
6412. That's Trey.
Oh, okay.
That's Trey.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question, and the answer to that question is not at all. They actually. So before I came back to Fayetteville, so I appraised in Fayetteville. I left and went to Charlotte, lived in Charlotte for a year and a half, and then I came back here. When I was in Charlotte, there was a neighborhood that was marketed as a green neighborhood. Every house in there had solar panels. Every house in there had a battery backup system with solar panels. The same builder built a community directly across the street from this development. So 2 developments, identical. One had solar panels, one did not. Houses sold for the exact same price in those 2 neighborhoods. The biggest piece of it is, and around here, is most people, 95% of them, don't own the solar panels outright. And so that's obviously the first big piece. They've got to be owned before we can give value to them. So that's usually nixes, 95% of it. Now they'll say, oh, well, they're going to be paid off at closing. As of the effective day of the appraisal, they're not owned. So they can't be in here. And then if you go in and say, well, we want that, well, then I make the appraisal subject to the payoff of the loan of the solar panels, just to put solar panels on there and say, value was considered, which I still haven't been able to find something that's sold that tells me there's any additional value for those solar panels. So we've added those in there in condition appraisal, still not going to add any value to it. And then the loan can't close because the loan has been made subject to those being paid off, but they're being paid off. So it just throws everything into hold. And so anytime I've ever had them like berate me that that's what I needed to do, and I've done it, the lender finally calls back and says, if you don't remove these solar panels off of here, we ain't closing this loan. And I'm like, I tried to tell them that 2 weeks ago, but they didn't want to hear it. But then the flip of that is that I haven't seen anything that's sold that's showed that there's been any increase in value because of solar panels being there. I think, my opinion on solar panels is pretty strong. That there's no value add there at the end of the day with solar panels, because most people finance them, and they finance them for 15 years, 20 years. In that 15 to 20 years, once they paid them off, they're at the end of their life and they've got to be replaced. And now we're financing them again for 15 to 20 years. Same time, you go talk to a roofer and say, hey, we got solar panels on this roof. We need you to come replace the roof. Cost of your roof just doubled because now they've got to hire somebody to come take the solar panels off. They've got to store them so they don't get broken. And then they've got to hire somebody to come back out and put it back on when they're done. So then your roof cost on let's just say a 1,200 square foot house that was, $10,000. Now your roof's going to cost 18. So then you just lost another 8 there because of your solar panels. So there's just so many pieces that come into it where I'm like, I don't see, your $300, at most electrical bill is now just turned into $300 on a loan payment on solar panels. So where is your money saved? If you want to say you're being green, that's great, but that's about all you're going to get out of it. Yeah. And a solar panel salesman will, they'll sell you to the house till the cows come home. Oh yeah, you put these panels on there and your value is going to go up $35,000. And I had one come to my house, came to my house, and I was like, I'm gonna let this guy in. My wife was like, don't do it. I said, I'm doing it. Sat in there, he was rolling. And I said, what supports this value? Where does it come from? Because I want to be able to tell my friends about. Oh, he was so excited. He said, well, this house over here sold that has solar panels on it. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's great. And I said, when did it sell? And he was like, oh, I'm not sure, but I just know this, that, and the other. And I was like, hold on just a second. I was like, I'll be right back. I ran into my office and I pulled it up. This house sold in like 2015, like 10 years ago, and didn't have solar panels when it sold. And I'm like, so where are you getting the information from? And he was like, so he immediately was just like, oh. I was like, yeah, I'm an appraiser. He didn't know that before. And he was like, man, I'll be very honest with you. Like, it's just what I was trained to say. They're just, there's no repercussion to them. If they say these solar panels add this, like there's no once you sign that contract, they're done with you in that sense. So there's a lot of neighborhoods where you're seeing them pop up and they just don't bring a value add. And at the end of the day, they're gonna cost you more money, especially the roof side of it. I've asked several roofers, and there's a lot of roofer companies that won't touch house with solar panels on them. They said we're not even dealing with it. So the ones that do, again, is why they've got you pegged, because now I know you're going to have to pay me because there's a lot of people that won't bother with it. And I'm not taking those off. I'm hiring somebody to do it, and that's expensive. So, it's one of those things where I just haven't run in to see a value add in any of it yet.
And I think you were talking about earlier, trying to find the value like with the home. So like a nice pool house or some type of ADU there. Is that the same process? You try to go out?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that I always try to do is I try to find something that's got the exact same thing. So I try to find something with a pool house, or I try to find something that's, if I have an ADU, they're basically going to say I've got to have something else that has a full ADU with it. So I'll try to find something that has that. Now, if I can't find something that has that specific amenity that's similar, I'll go out and find something that has amenities that value wise are similar, that can support my adjustments for the other comps that don't have that value add to it. So really, at that point in time, I'm just kind of trying to go find something with some additional value that supports this, so that I don't have an across the line adjustment for, $50,000 on the pool house and the ADU that's there as well. So
even if that house may be 15 miles out, you would use it as one of your comps?
Yep, I'll put it on there, and sometimes I'll use it and give it weight in the appraisal, and sometimes I'll put a comment in there. Comp 6 was utilized to support the adjustment for the additional amenities that the subject has. It was given little to no weight in overall, determining the overall market value. So it'll go one of two ways. I'll either utilize it if it makes sense, and if it doesn't, if I had to go crazy, there's times where I've had to go to another county, like I'm in Fayetteville doing a really nice house, and I've got to go to Pinehurst to get an amenity that this house has, or I've been in Sanford appraising houses and had to go to up into Raleigh and then down into Pinehurst to pull stuff to give me some support on some things. And for those, I will simply just say, these sales were utilized to support the value for the amenities of the subject, and we're given no reliance in determining market value.
So I just have one. I hadn't heard this before. Crawl space with the attic. You're looking for the water supply. So how are you gonna put rodents on the? I don't know if you're kidding or you're not kidding.
No. So what I would do there, like some of those things will be subject to, like the water would be a subject to thing. The rodents would usually be like, unless there's just like significant damage from them, I would just note like that there's evidence of some sort of infestation. You know, if there's like I open it up, yeah, bats. Yeah, if I see bats in an attic, yeah, you know, so I just would note those things. Now, if there's damage from them, then I would call for them to do things. But oftentimes I'll just note like there's evidence here of something. But if I see something, then I'll note that as well. But usually I'm just kind of reporting what I see in that instance.
And then the lender would make that.
Yeah, then it's up to the lender if they're going to make them, you know, remediated or have an exterminator come out and take care of the problem there. Same deal, like if I've been places where there's been like a pretty serious like roach infestation. So same deal. I'll note that because, you know, if it's FHA, VA, USDA, I'll require it to be fixed because I think it plays more to the safety side of that. Whereas a conventional loan, not necessarily the end of the world. You know, but it would just be noted. You know, the biggest piece of it, safe, sound, secure. Like that's how I look at properties. I'll get agents that ask me like, what do we need to do here? What's going to hold us up? I always say for the safety side of things, imagine a house like this is what I run into so much. It's just this little things, but imagine you got a 3-year-old that you're about to just set loose on this property. What's going to hurt them? Is there a bunch of broken glass that, you know, from a window or from a door that was broken, then the window and door have been replaced, but they left all the glass laying on the ground there? Is that there? Is there a bunch of nails somewhere? A bunch of, you know, scrap lumber that's got nails sticking out of it? Is that somewhere? The peeling paint, you know, is a big thing. So safety wise, you know, the railings on porches, like does all of that stuff meet? If I was to let my 3-year-old nephew cut loose here, what's going to hurt him? So yeah, so the stairs, they say if it's over 3, but the big thing to know is just 30 inches. So if the height of whatever it is, porch, deck, whatever, is over 30 inches from the ground. Now, I'll run into a lot of times where you'll go and you'll clearly see that they brought in just a bunch of mulch and piled it up against the edge of this porch so that it's not over 30 inches. And I'm gonna make them put a rail up every time they do that. But here's the thing too, it doesn't have to be permanent. You know, I'll go to refis all the time and they have this beautiful view and they're like, we don't want a rail. That's great. You got to put something up while I'm here and you can take it right down when I leave. It doesn't have to be a custom millwork railing that you put up. You just got to put something up so somebody can't fall off of that. And as soon as I leave, take it down. You know, that's your prerogative. But when I'm there, it's got to be done. But yeah, so 30 inches, like that's the best thing I would say is 30 inches. And it's 30 inches as the max somewhere. So you may have, you know, might be 20 inches all the way down. And then on the end over here, it's 30. If it's 30 over there, it's got to have a railing all the way around. So it's not just 30, you know, where it's 30 inches, it's got to be railed all the way around. So 30 inches is the number to know. They say 3 stairs and then 30 inches. But there's times where the stairs, like they build short stairs. Yeah, they build short stairs or they build tall stairs, whatever the case may be. So I just always just measure my height, and that's where I'll go from there. Yeah.
Sometimes they require
yeah, it's 30, and like it's happened before where, you know, like I've done appraisals, turn them in, and the underwriter comes back and says like, this photo looks like it's more than 30 inches in this, and I'm like, you're daggone right, it sure enough is. You know, I just flew by that and missed it. But usually, you know, I'll look at 3 stairs. Like, that's kind of like for the first tail, typical stairs. Okay, there's 3. All right, let me measure this thing. And if it's, you know, if it's 29 7/8, or if it's right on 30, you know, usually I'm gonna put a photo on there and say we were just at or below 30 inches. You know, nothing was required. But again, that's just one of those deals where I'm just gonna try to report it. They may come back and say they need to add a railing to it, and at the end of the day, that's the lender's prerogative. But yeah, so I'll always measure it. I'll always put a photo of me with the tape there and snap a photo showing that it's on the ground and whatever my height may be. So yeah.
I just have one last question about the adjustments. What I know that typically when we do our market analysis, we'll definitely square feet will be acreage. What do you think are like major, I guess, like important things that we could also like adjust for?
Yeah, so couple of those pieces there. So to start out, so you have, when you're doing the living area adjustment, so obviously we know you don't adjust, you know, dollars to dollars on it's sold at $120 a square foot or it's sold at $200 a square foot. Like we're not adjusting the GLA at $200 a square foot. And we know the reasoning behind that. Or do y'all want me to talk about that for just a hair?
Yeah.
So-
You're talking about like where we like.
Yeah, well, so like,
add it.
well, so if you're seeing on the appraisal where there's a GLA adjustment on the appraisal for square footage, and let's just say the home sold at $200 a square foot, I'm not adjusting between the subject and those comps at $200 a square foot. You're likely going to see me adjust anywhere between, depending on the neighborhood, on that $200 square foot sale. I might adjust anywhere from, you know, $80 to $120 square foot is going to be what it is. Usually it's anywhere between 40 and 60% of what that upper number is the typical range of where I'm going to fall for an adjustment, because, you know, we know that what that selling price per square foot is including everything. And what I'm adjusting on the GLA is just the GLA. It's not the garage. It's not the land. It's not the outbuildings. It's none of that stuff. It is just the, you know, heated and cooled living area is what we're adjusting for here. So that number kind of fluctuates depending on what the property has. The property has a lot of amenities. That number may be a little bit less because there's obviously more things outside of the GLA that contribute to the value. If there's not a lot of stuff outside, there's not a lot of other contributing pieces, that number may be more that I'm adjusting. That percentage may be more on the GLA adjustment because there are less things outside that are affecting that overall selling price per square foot. You know, so that's that. And then obviously, you know, the land, the big piece, you know, with land adjustments, a lot of times I'll see, they'll be like, oh, well, you know, the land value on the tax records in this neighborhood is $10,000 more than the neighborhood next door. And I'm like, that's great. It's really not supported other than that's what the tax card says. And, you know, we all know how the tax departments are. You know, somebody just threw a dart at a dartboard and said, oh, 10 grand, that's the difference between our values here. So the way that you want to look at like typical lots in neighborhoods is like a builder's lot is a builder's lot is a builder's lot. So if you go to a new construction neighborhood and you've got, you know, you got a house that's on like 1.5 acres, and then every other house in the neighborhood is on 3/4 of an acre. You have an agent that lists this thing and says, oh, you got to pay this lot surplus fee for $25,000 because you got a double size lot. No. The only reason that builder put that house on 1.5 acres and not 3/4 of an acre, he couldn't build on it, or because the way the neighborhood laid out, he couldn't get another house back there, you know? And so it is, you know, it is not additionally added value of land because you can't do anything with it. You know, it's not like I can double my lot value because I got double the lot, because you can't break that other half of that lot off and do anything else with it. There's no, you know, there's no additional value there in that value add. So I run into that all the time in new construction stuff where they pay a lot surplus because they have a bigger lot. And I'll call the agent and I'll say, look, I see your lot surplus here. You're not going to see it on the appraisal because there's no market support for it. Because it is truly, you think we give you a little bit more square footage on this lot and you have to pay for it. Like, some of you may find somebody that will pay for it, but I'm not going to tell you this will be supported on the appraisal because the market does not support that. So that's one thing. So just to know, like, you know, I'll see a lot of times I'll get a CMA over, or I'll get a Tidewater and they'll send over some comps and they've done some adjustments on comps to say like, this is where we see it at. And you'll have a neighbor, you know, have a house, and then there'll be 2 neighborhoods over and they've done a $5,000 or $10,000 adjustment on that house for the site, but the lots are, you know, 2,000 square foot difference. And I'm like, it's the same neighborhood, you know, it's the same location, same amenities, you know, this one isn't, it's not like this one's gated and whatever it's gonna be. Like we're apples to apples here. The tax card says that's $10,000 more, but you know, I know that again, typical buyer, think about that. My typical buyer standing in front of this house right here, and we go, you know, a quarter mile down the road and walk in front of this other house that you just said was worth $10,000 more because the site. Similar houses to be comparable. Is my buyer paying you $10,000 more for that lot because it's in this neighborhood? 95% of the time, they're not. You know, they're going to take the one for $10,000 less that is a quarter mile up the road that can get everywhere the exact same amount of time. You know, we're not in a crazy different school district now. We're you know, we're none of those pieces. They're not paying $10,000 more for that lot. You know, simply because of that. Now there may be something else. We might be having $10,000. Might be something else for that property, but the lot isn't a piece of it. So yeah. So that And then really, I think the biggest piece of it to know is that when you see my appraisal or whatever, if you're doing a CMA, anything that I adjust for on there, at the end of the day, I've got to be able to pull data from the market and say, this is where this adjustment came from. And so there's a lot of things now that, like an older appraiser, like would come in and say, oh, this porch is $3,000 and this deck is $2,000 and that patio over there is $1,000 and that stoop is $500. My question back would be, show me the market data that gave you that $500 stoop adjustment. You're not gonna find it. You can't deduct $500 out of a $325,000 sale. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. And if you do, you lied somewhere, because you can't pull. It's impossible. I don't know what the percentage that is there, but that's like, 1/10% that you just pulled, did some math, and said, oh, this is what says this is worth $500. Your cost to put that in maybe have been $500, but you can't pull a market adjustment out. Now, there's things where sometimes you can't find a market adjustment for, and so you can do a depreciated cost to support an adjustment. But that would be for bigger things. That would be for a pool house. That would be for a intricate, for just unique things that you're not going to find anywhere else in the market. So sometimes you have to do a depreciated cost. The house in Fayetteville had a tennis court. Fun fact: there are no houses within a 125-mile radius of Fayetteville that have sold with private tennis courts. So luckily for me, there was damage, and this guy was in a lawsuit over the tennis court. So I told him, I'm like, if I put this on here, it's going to hold up until you fix the court, which is what this lawsuit's about. So we ended up not including it in value. But if I had that and I was going to have to give value to it, like, the best way to do that is going to do a depreciated cost. What's the cost of that brand new? What's the condition currently? We depreciate it down based on like the economic life of whatever that item is. And that would be how you can get your value there. But there's got to be some sort of a support for where these adjustments come from. Yeah. So the way to do that, like, to be very frankly simple about it, is I would go find, 2 houses that are as identical as I could find, and the only difference was the bathroom, and see what my sale price was there. And that is, I'm really putting that in a big note list, because I want to know where I got this information from for reports down the road. But boom, these houses sold at $10,000 difference. The only real difference, after we've adjusted, because a lot of times you'll have like a different GLA for a house like that. If you got a 3-bath versus a 2-bath house, you're going to have a bedroom difference and a GLA difference. We don't adjust for bedrooms, like bedroom count, per se. Our markets just don't support that there's a significant difference there. And also the way the reporting is done on the MLS sheets. You have an agent that'll call a house a 3-bedroom, and you have an agent that'll call the same house a 4-bedroom. One of them was like, oh, that's a bonus room. And the other one's like, no, it's a bedroom. It meets all the requirements. So we don't adjust bedroom to bedroom. We let the GLA do the talking.
What's your stipulations on what is to make it a bedroom? Because I called the commission about this.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to 100 realtors, and you'll get 97 different answers
Yeah.
of what an actual bedroom would you consider it. And now you don't even do that. You just do GLA.
Well, so you do that in a sense of like, for the bedroom count, like I'm going to count the bedrooms as bedrooms, but like I'm just not going to adjust subject to comps based on a different bedroom count. I'm going to let the GLA talk there. But biggest point out of all of it, first things first, is that second point of egress. So you got a door that comes into that room. We've either got to have another door that goes another direction, or we've got to have a window that meets code. Big key there, got to meet code. If you go into a room, a lot of, like, there are some older modern houses, and I really hadn't seen this around here. You see it in Charlotte a lot, where you have a room they call it a bedroom, and you go in and the only window was one of those narrow windows that was at eye level. That's above code, so it doesn't count as a point of egress. So I would have 1-bedroom houses that were really, by the way they were marketing it, was 3 or 4-bedroom houses, but they were 1-bedroom house because the windows in the bedroom didn't meet code. Like, a kid's not getting out of that window in the case of a fire. So that's the biggest piece of it all. First thing is, you got to have a second point of egress. It can be a door. A lot of people say, oh, no, it's got to be a window. It does have to be a window. You can have a door. That is another option of escape from that room, to be your point of egress. And And then from there, so you'll hear a lot of people say that it has to have a closet, doesn't have to have a closet. The way that I always look at that is accepted in the market. And so like if I'm appraising a 1850s house, you're not gonna have closets in every room. They had wardrobes, so it's acceptable in those markets to have a room that is a bedroom that doesn't have an actual closet for that bedroom. Aside from that, in newer markets, in newer construction and really things that are 60s and 50s, 60s and on, you're going to have closets. And so the way I look at it and the way I count my bedrooms in those houses is accepted and typically understood that for those properties they're going to have a closet in the room to be a bedroom. So that's kind of the two pieces there, is like, what is the property I'm appraising? What is the accepted market for that property? Do most of the homes of this stature have a closet in the bedroom? Yes. Then if it has a closet, I'll call it a bedroom. If it doesn't, I'll call it something else. And so that's how I'll do my bedroom count. But again, that's why I don't adjust for bedroom count. Now, the only time I would ever be adjusting for bedroom. Yeah, so GLA is the answer, because I can say, well, we've got this. I mean, same thing when you go into a market that has a septic tank. It may be a 5-bedroom house. It may have 5 rooms that have the egress and have closets, but the septic's only for 3. To me, that's outside of my purview to what, these can't be used as bedrooms. When you buy a house, you can do whatever you want to with it. That's beyond me. I'm going to let the GLA do the talking. I'm going to report it as I see it, and then go from there. Yeah, and go from there. So back to your question. So I would kind of adjust for the GLA to get our houses similar in the GLA wise. We're knocking that out, and then whatever my value difference there is. If the bathroom count is the only other thing, then that would say, hey, these, full bath is worth $10,000 or a full bath is worth 15, whatever the case may be. So that's how I would start deducting adjustments or stuff like that. Garage, same thing. If I got 2 houses, one has a 2, one has a 3, then I'm making notes, saving that, hey, in this area, a additional 1-bay garage adds, some places it might add $6,000, some places it might add $20,000, so I'll keep that in my work file and so that's where my adjustments come from. And then from there, you get down to be like, oh, well, we've got a porch and a patio, and the house next door has a stoop, or they have 2 stoops, how do you adjust for that there? And I'm like, those are things that I think are marketability more so than like substantial adjustments on the appraisal. So very seldom you'll find me adjusting for, we have a porch and a deck, and they have a porch and a patio, or it's a difference. Yeah. You very rare. Now, a lot of times the way I look at it is, if you have a house like my subject has, a porch and a screen porch and a deck and a patio, and they're all very exquisite. Those are going to be instances where a lot of times the overall quality of the home is probably going to be superior to something that doesn't have all of those pieces. So it's one of those things where I look at it where a lot of times it will fall and form into the quality adjustment that I might make, versus an individual, here's my breakout for a porch value and a stoop value, because again, it's really hard to deduct a $500, $1,000, $2,000 adjustment out of a $325,000 sale. Hard pressed to be able to really prove that math to somebody if they ask, where did you get this adjustment from? Yeah.
Kind of jumping from there, I have a question.
Mhm.
So when you go in as an appraiser, we're talking about the safety. You always think that if the windows don't open and stay open, that's a safety. But with my experience, it hasn't been pointed out.
Mhm. Yeah. So.
It's 12/24, so if anybody just read a couple of times, you don't have to scroll, we went over. It's fine. But
Okay.
I just wanted to.
Yeah.
If anyone
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good till whenever. So you guys, I'm here with you. Great question. I don't open windows. No like lender requirement as far as like FHA, VA requires you to test the windows that I've ever been shown. I've had people come back and say, well, you didn't test them. And I'm like, it's outside of my scope of work. Now, there has to be a point there, but the point of egress, but to say to that point, if it's a window, I'm throwing something through it. I would say in the case of a fire, for me, I'm a firefighter as well. Like if I'm I'm trapped, I'm not fooling with the window. You know, I'm something's going through it, whether it's a you know, a nightstand or it's me. You know, something's going through that window to get it open. And you know, it's funny because like there's a study out there that shows that in the case of a fire, the number of times that people said they couldn't get out of windows was simply because the window was locked and not because you know, but because it didn't work. I mean, you think about it, in that panic of that moment, you run over there and the window, you know, you got two locks on there, and one of them flipped one way and one's the other way. You flip both of them. Well, now you just unlock one and lock the other, and now you're yanking on the window again, and you're still, you know. So it's that midst of panic of does the window work or not? And I'm like, the window may or may not work, but I can guarantee you one thing: that glass will break. You know, and if it doesn't, you build a hurricane-proof house at the beach, and you know you need to have some other options in that case as well. But yeah, so I don't test windows. Note to be made with VA, and I was really reminded of this recently. I didn't know it per se. I'm not allowed to test things for a VA appraisal. So like if I go to a VA appraisal, I'm not supposed to go in a room and turn the lights on and say the lights do or do not work. Same thing with appliances for a VA appraisal. I'm not. If I on a VA appraisal make it subject to, you know, the lights being working or the heat and air being working or the appliances working because they weren't, I can get in trouble with the VA because it's outside of the scope of work of the VA appraisal. Yeah. So it was something that I'd heard it and never, and I didn't call it. I actually had another appraiser friend who called it on an appraisal, and they were like, man, we got reamed for that from the VA. They say, you are not a home inspector. You are not here to be inspecting the functional components of the home. We are here to report things that affect marketability and things that affect market value. And aside from that, we are not here to test the ins and outs of the assets of the home.
So I've seen one subject to only power wash due to
Mhm.
So
in that instance, you know, you can run into like the soundness of the home. You know, is there an effect from basically? Are there things where maintenance hasn't been taken care of, and so are there other issues? So that's one of those pieces that would play into the soundness of the property. Could call it, could not call it, but calling it is certainly acceptable in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I will be. You know, I'm in Fayetteville every week. Obviously based out of Sanford, but I'm down here every week looking at houses. So I'll be glad to come back and do another one. We do this same thing. We talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. Again, Trey's available usually to come and do these as well. So